Mobile hunters, are you looking to make the move to saddle hunting this year? Or maybe you just want to add a few new pieces of gear or upgrade your current saddle gear. If that's the case, then head over to tetherednation.com where they've got all mobile hunters covered. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old timer, Tethered is your one-stop saddle shop. From saddles to ropes, sticks, ascenders, whatever it is you need, they have you covered. I've personally been using their gear for the past 3 seasons now. My base setup consists of the Phantom saddle and the Predator platform. And if you're wondering why I've chosen to use their gear above all else, here's the cliff notes. They're innovative and pushing the mobile hunting forward overall. They cut no corners and prioritize the safety and performance of their gear. They care about the community that they've created, and their gear allows me to hunt free. And above all else, I like to support good people doing good work. If you're interested in upping your mobile hunting game, then head to tetherednation.com. This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew Coffee roasts premium single origin coffee, guaranteeing to deliver the freshest coffee directly to your doorstep. The kicker? They're 2% for conservation certified and donate 10% of their proceeds back to organizations who support the interests of our hunting community. So go to skullbrewcoffee.com and pick up one of their 3-killer roasts and fuel your hunt and fill more tags with Skull Brew Coffee. Welcome to the Truths from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 239. Today, I'm joined by Eddie Claypool to talk about finding DIY bow hunting success and killing big deer. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine here in these dog days of summer. I actually had a pretty good deer week this past week. Was able to check out a few cameras in some areas that I had scouted this past winter. I was really kind of unsure of what was going to maybe be popping in those areas, and I'll just put it this way, that I was pleasantly surprised with the talent that showed up and the fact that some of these places, I wasn't sure I was even going to find deer, so to speak. So the fact that there were deer on camera and a couple really nice bucks gives me some hope or some promise, at least for the fall. We know, of course, that there's going to be a shift that happens and stuff like that. But in this particular piece, in one of the areas specifically, there is a crop of really good deer that are kind of hanging around there. And so I would think that 1 or 2 of them may stay in the general area as we hit the fall shift. But that still remains to be seen. So that essentially means I'm going to be doing a little bit of traveling here in PA to hunt an area that I didn't really anticipate hunting this year. Just didn't think I was going to have enough intel to get much accomplished. But seems to be, my motto kind of always is that I'll go wherever the deer are, wherever the better deer are. And right now, that's proven out to be the spot or the area, and locally. Still haven't checked cameras yet. Probably 2 to 3 weeks out from checking those. And then we'll see what kind of talent we have in this general area. But, velvet season is certainly here, and velvet's popping. Hopefully I'll be able to get out and do a little bit of glassing. And speaking of velvet, our buddies over at Exodus Outdoor Gear are kicking off their Velvet Fest. That's, of course, the official start to deer season for me. They're running from July 21st through August 11th. They'll have some awesome prizes for, any of us that are using the hashtag Velvet Fest in social media, so you can share your whitetail adventures and get yourself in the running for some killer prizes. And if you're in the market for a trail camera, if you need a few to set out still, Velvet Fest is the perfect time to pick those up. They'll be sending out some exclusive savings through their email newsletter throughout the campaign. So you'll want to head over to exodusoutdoorgear.com and sign up for their newsletter. The other cool thing is every single camera comes with a random prize that you'll have to scratch off to reveal the prize once you receive your package. I know just from talking to my buddies over there, they got some huge deals that you're not going to want to miss out on, so make sure you take full advantage of that. And then to sweeten the pot even more, every single order offers everyone the chance to receive a limited edition hashtag Velvet Fest laser engraved camera. And if you are the lucky recipient of said camera, you'll receive $1,000 gift card from Exodus. That's right, a big G note from the fellas at Exodus. There's a lot going on with this campaign, like I mentioned, so you're going to want to sign up for the newsletter so you don't miss anything. That's at exodusoutdoorgear.com. So make sure you head over there and get familiar with all their information. If you're not familiar with Exodus, which I'd find it hard-pressed that you guys aren't if you listen to this show for any length of time, over the last 6 years, my boys over there have consistently shown they build quality trail cameras and that flat out work. And of course, the best trail camera warranty policy, period, bar none. Every single camera is backed by a 5-year warranty and even comes with a theft and damage coverage. Yep, that's right. You heard it correctly. 5 years, literally half a decade, you're covered by the Exodus 5-year warranty. But more than likely, you won't need it because these cameras are built to last. So be sure to take advantage or take part of the Velvet hashtag Velvet Fest celebration. Be sure to tag me and Exodus in any of your pictures because I'd like to check out what you guys have going on throughout this summer. One last piece of housekeeping before we jump into today's show is you shouldn't be drinking shitty coffee while you're out hunting this year. So make sure you head over to skullbrewcoffee.com. They have those travel packs, pour over packs where they're super small, compartmentalized. You open it up, stick it over whatever cup you're using. You hit the jet boil some water, get some hot water. Dump it in, voila, you have killer coffee. No more of that instant crap while you're out hunting that gives you the rot gut. So head over to skullbrewcoffee.com and use the promo code TFTS21 to get yourself some savings. And so with that, we will jump into today's show. Have a super cool show for you guys today. Have on, a guy that needs very little to no introduction. So Mr. Eddie Claypool. Eddie is a well-accomplished outdoor writer. He's probably, I would say, you would be hard-pressed to find a more successful DIY bow hunter of any species. Eddie's been getting it done since like I think 1980, I think he said was his first out-of-state DIY hunt. And his record, his track record for success is just unbelievable, whether it's on Magnum elk, whether it's on killing big deer in the plains and hunting that plains country where there's not a lot of trees and not, just a vast sea of CRP. Eddie was gracious enough to come on the show and cut it up with me for a while. And he's just truly one of the most genuine and down to earth folks that I think I've ever had the opportunity to talk to. And his ability and how he kind of thinks through things is just next level. And he doesn't need any endorsement from me for that. That's for sure. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got to tell you, I'm pretty excited to have the guest that I have on the line with me today. I am speaking with a gentleman who has been a writer for a number of outdoor publications for a bunch of years, super experienced DIY bow hunter, everything from whitetails to Western big game, you name it. He's probably chased it and has it on a wall somewhere. But I'm talking to none other than Mr. Eddie Claypool. How you doing this evening?
Very well, thanks. Nice to talk to you, and hope you can get a tidbit or two of wisdom out of this old redneck.
Well, I have a feeling we're gonna get more than a bit or two. From the reading that I've done of you and I've listened to you in the past, it's just there's always different nuggets that I end up picking up from you, at different times that I've listened to or have read your content. So I don't think we're gonna have a problem picking up some tidbits from you.
All right.
So first, man, I know a lot of folks out there listening, have probably, whether they know it or not, they've probably read something by you or have seen something from you, whether they recognize it or not. But just so folks out there have a little bit of sense of who you are and where you're from, just, give me a little bit of background about you, where you're from, what you do for a living, and who Eddie Claypool is.
Well, I live here in the hills of northeast Oklahoma, kind of rural America, and I grew up just common as they come. I likened my lifestyle to Andy and Opie off the Andy Griffith show. My dad was Justice of Peace of a little town, and I was the bar-headed town terror. But when I got a little older and got out of school, I was looking for, my direction, and Dad put me to work in the construction field, and I got stuck there and stayed there all my days. I was a union pipe fitter, and as I got older and really started hunting hard and traveling a lot, I realized I couldn't probably ever have a better occupation because you can work when you want and get off when you want and work as many hours as you want when you do work. So that's one of the reasons I stayed at it all my days. And I recently retired from it. And so, I started bow hunting back in my early teens around here local. And I didn't have much luck. I didn't have any mentors to teach me much. It was all the school of hard knocks for me, but that's how you learn the best is on your own,
That's right.
And when I finally got in my early 20s, I had started heading out west. I'd made my first trips out there, and I just loaded my old truck up. I didn't know literally straight up from sideways about what I was doing, and went out west and just tackled those mountains with a fervor, and fell in love with them, and decided that that was my new passion in life, was the high country and elk and mule deer. And from that day on in 1980 up until here recently, I have just ate, slept, lived, and breathed Western stuff. I am a hardcore whitetail guy because, you know, I come from whitetail country and I love to hunt them, but I've got to admit my passion has been Western game, really, especially elk. They are what fueled my fire for 40 years. And so, you know, when you get the passion inside you, like I've had, literally to the point of, you know, probably maybe an addiction to the point of psychopathic, literally. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people say I'm crazy, and I probably am, but when you have it that way, you can accomplish anything you want. You can learn to be an excellent Western do-it-yourself bow hunter. You just got to make your lifestyle where you can put the kind of time and effort in that I did. And that's the biggest hurdle that most people can't produce, is the time along with the passion to put in the effort. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
yeah. I totally hear that. There's a couple things I want to unpack there real quick. One was, you know, you kind of explained that, you know, you came from a real rural area, the Opie and Andy kind of, you know, upbringing or lifestyle, right? What was the thing that kind of got you out of your comfort zone and pushed you west, right? Because I think that some people, even though they have it in their mind that it's something they might want to do one day, they always kind of let that, well, that's just something that's out of my reach kind of mentality hold them back. And especially for people, I come from a real rural town in Pennsylvania too, so I'm well aware of that kind of mentality. So what was it that catapulted you to say, you know what, I'm just going to go do this?
Kind of in two ways. One, the biggest probably, was basically I'm an only child. I grew up on my own. I've never been scared of, I've had to do everything on my own. I mean, play with myself, not, you know, hold it. I better rephrase that. But anyway, I had to entertain myself. But anyway, I mean, I was never bashful about tackling anything. I had a very adventuresome spirit in me as a young man. That's important because you've got to be able to dive in head first and see how deep the water is, you know. And then when I got about, around graduation age or a little shortly thereafter, I read an issue of Bowhunter magazine one time way back there, and I don't even remember who wrote the story. It was some rather random fella that had killed some elk with a bow. And I mean, back in my day, there was nothing video. There was no video. There was no, you know, the only thing that was out there was hunting, just a few hunting magazines, you know. And I read an article about going bow hunting in New Mexico. And I had went to Colorado as a young man with my family on some vacation. So I had a little bit of the ice broke there as far as it's not that far to get from my house to Colorado, you know. So I just, you know, it was a matter of a whole bunch of things coming together, an adventuresome spirit, a desire to up the bow hunting. I mean, I'd hunted whitetails, hadn't been real good at it, had not mastered whitetails at all. But once I got out there that first trip and got in that alpine country, there was something about that environment, that living on top of the world by yourself in danger, fighting Mother Nature constantly. It's a struggle that nothing you will do in your life compares to as far as the mental and physical strain and challenge. I just fell in love with it. It was just what I was made for. It felt to me like my calling. And so there was a whole lot of things had to come together in me, probably to get me to become, you know, the guy that I have grown into.
Right. Now, can you, I'm sure that first trip out west was really impactful. Probably has you probably have a pretty strong memory of it, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Right. Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that first trip, because that was really,
Okay.
it seems very much like a seminal moment for you. You went out
It
on your
was.
own and you took on this
Yeah.
challenge, and even kind of somewhat not even knowing what you're getting into, which is always kind of the
Right.
extra scary part. Like, not only are you doing something that's different and foreign, but you're doing it in an area that's unforgiving.
Absolutely. And if you literally had a documentary of my first trip and a person could sit down and watch it, they would just shake their head. They literally, you wouldn't even be able to talk. You'd be like, that was his first trip. Any moron could do that, because I'm not kidding you. You talk about Gomer goes to town. When I headed to the hills the first time, I had a backpack, cheapo depot backpack, a pair of binoculars that only worked on one side, one eyepiece. One side didn't even work. I had no hunting clothes. Basically, I hunted in blue jeans and Red Wing work boots. I lived out of an ice chest in the back of my truck, slept in the bed of my truck when I wasn't in the woods, which was 90% of the time. I was literally so primitive that ain't even the beginnings of it. And I knew literally nothing about where I was going. I just drove up there, started driving through country, and when I spotted something that caught my eye, I'm liable to park there, jump out, beat the place down for a day or two, jump in the truck, move another. I mean, I was just like, young man goes west. You can't get enough of it, but you don't know what you're doing. And by the end of the second week of my outing, now mind you, 2 weeks, I mean, I'm up there goofing. I haven't accomplished anything, but I had parked on the side of the road up at the high country and spent the night. And I got up that morning, was standing there right after daylight, looking up on the mountains above me, and spotted a whole bunch of little specks up there above the timber line. About 6 hours later, I'd loaded a backpack, climbed 3,000 vertical feet up to those specks, and found them to be a herd of about 100 to 125 elk.
Jeez.
And that's what it took for me to first get into elk the first time. It took 2 weeks. I didn't even know where they lived. I literally didn't know if they lived in the desert hardly or up at Alpine. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, I mean, I had a long learning curve that first year. Come home from that trip, didn't even fire an arrow at nothing, didn't get near anything really. Crawled up and boogered a few elk. Come back, was so distraught and so invigorated that within 1 week was back up there, went back, stayed the last 2 weeks of the season, didn't get an elk, didn't kill an elk my first year, and was up there 4 weeks total. So, I mean, I don't have a miracle story the way I started. I started about as common as they come, but with the passion I had at the end of that first year, especially not filling a tag, I said that I'm going to do this. I am going to do this. Went back to next year in 81 the first time and killed my first elk by myself up at Timberline, and it's all been downhill ever since.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I hear you. I think that's the one thing that I appreciate, most about your story and how you've kind of come to be, who you are and who people, how people know you, is the fact that it was self-made and it is DIY and it's, it's hunts that anybody can go do, and that's the part. And that's the part that I love about it. And that's kind of what, inspired me to really start doing more traveling and hunting different places. And, it helps me, that experience of hunting different places. I try to go somewhere new every year. And a lot of times I don't even get a chance to scout it. I just show up and hunt it, for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And it helps make me a better hunter, I feel, because I'm having to always process things that I'm seeing on the fly, Yeah. Now, granted, I would love to have some time to scout. A lot of times it'd be helpful for sure. It's I'll take what I can get because I'm chasing experiences.
Exactly.
That's what I'm doing is chasing experiences. But the one thing I want to kind of circle back to here is, you mentioned lifestyle at one point, and I think that's one of the interesting things where it's like you prioritized hunting as one of the things in your life that you wanted to do, above a lot of other things. And when I've heard you kind of talk about it before, you really kind of built your life around to be able to hunt as much as you want to. Like you had a purpose built life
Yes.
that would allow you to
Yes.
do the things you want to do. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you set that up or how you kind of accomplished that?
You know, I don't know where I fit into this category of humanity and normal, especially, but I just know my experience. And from the moment I went out there and did that, I had a passion that I don't even know how to explain it. It was going to happen one way or the other. And so I just immediately started improvising every day of my life for the next quite a few years to get things. I mean, at age 20, you know, you're just married with children, you're just getting going, and there's so many things to juggle. But I always kept the vision, basically, of the beginning of elk season in Colorado in my mind, and I worked toward that all year. I rat holed money. I worked extra jobs. If I needed a pair of shoes, you know, I'd go haul hay a day and get the money and buy them. If I needed a backpacking one-man tent, man, you know, I mean, I remember the days when something like that was a year-long process for me to be able to get it, to purchase it. It was a major drain on the family if I took $100 bill and did something. We were living from Friday to Friday paychecks, you know.
Yeah.
And I always tried to be a good family man, but I don't know if I was or not. Many people said I was not. Many people said I was. We all know how that goes with life.
Right.
You're going to have your haters and you're going to have the people that see the reality. I spent a lot of time with my family. I took them up there with me unbelievable amounts of time and introduced them to all that stuff. Some liked, some didn't, but I just had a way of working all year and working extra and figuring out how to manage my occupation to where I would be on jobs that would be working maybe 7 days a week, sometimes for a month or two, for 12 hours a day. And I would pay my house payment 2 months ahead of time so that I didn't have to make a house payment for the month of September and November. You know, I often run right straight home from a hunt in Colorado that would be 5 weeks long, get home, and the next day be back on a 7-day-a-week, 12-hour-a-day job, work it till November 1, get amazingly laid off, and then be off all the month of November to hunt. So, I mean, it was just a matter of scrapping in every direction I could to keep the ball rolling, called, you know, married with children. And yet being able to supply, I mean, since I've been about 20, the past 40 some years, I have only worked a job one fall, autumn in my entire life.
Wow. That's pretty good.
I mean, I literally worked, you know, August through December 1 year. I've never worked August through December other than that 1 year in 40 some years. So
right.
How many people can do that? Not very many, if any.
Yeah.
You know, it takes, you know, it's really the life of a single young man. If you're going to do it, you need to get out of high school, go tackle it, learn it, do it, and then maybe get married later in life. And when you're ready, you've got a lot of that out of your system, maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. But there's something you said in there that makes even more sense to me, and that was the word discipline. And it's funny because I've heard that in different ways. Like Don, I don't know if you know Don Higgins or not, but Don is a guy who I've talked about. You know, I've had him on the show, and he's talked about discipline, and that's one of the reasons why Don kills a lot of big deer. Is like he's very disciplined in his approach to killing them. And it can also be said the same in being able to go hunt the ways you want to hunt, the types of hunts you want to have. You have to be disciplined in being able to set them up and take care of your priorities. You know, be disciplined in that approach. So whenever it comes time to go do the hunt or the thing, whatever it is that you want to do, that you're set up to do that. So whenever you're doing it, when you're doing the thing you love to do, you're focused on that. And you're not thinking about, I need to get back home to make this payment, or I got to go do this, or whatever the case is.
Yeah. I was really, as an only child, I grew up taking care of my own business and dotting every I and crossing every T, because I learned early on in life, if you're not disciplined and if you don't make things happen, I mean, nothing's going to, it's just, life's going to consume you. It's going to eat you up. I've been around so many people, I just call them whatevers. You know, they're just whatevers. I'm not far opposite end of that. I'm a psychotic, disciplined, mentally and physically disciplined, and that's what it takes. And I've sent so many people out west on my type of hunting, and there isn't 1 in 10 of them literally that ever stick to it. They just, they read it. It's a fantasy to them. I tell them what they're getting into. They do not believe me. They go try it, and it ends up being not a good experience for them, and they give it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's only the certain few, and you'll know if you try it. When you get done with it, you'll know whether you're for it or not.
Yeah, that's actually how I made one of my best hunting buddies. We scouted this one piece together in a rugged piece of country, and it was middle of the summer, just ridiculously hot, like 90-some degrees. We were tent camping, and it's a place, it's a big woods place and low deer density, but there's really good deer there. And he'd hunted it before, and this was the first time we ever scouted or anything together, so we just met. And and he kept telling me, he's like, hey, there's not a lot of deer. You're either going to see like a giant, or you might not see anything for 10 days. That's just kind of how this place works, And and I was like, I'm okay. Let's do it. And he kept telling me all leading up to it how hard it is, right? And so we did the hunt. I hunted dark to dark for 10 days straight. I saw 3 deer in 10 days, and by the end of it, he looked at me. He was like, all right. He's like, you're as crazy as I am. He's like, I think we can hunt together. Yeah. So
there you go. Yeah.
It was at that point, because we have this saying, it's like, we'll see people at camp there, every year, but we'll never see the same group of people twice.
Right. Well, you can imagine with me being 62 now and starting it, shortly after 18 and spending, tens of thousands of hours out west. I mean, I've averaged between a month and 2 months of unbroken time out west every year. How many different people I've went through as hunting buddies trying to, find somebody that I could have a good time with. And in 40 some years, I've only run across 2, only 2 that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it is. They like it. They're having fun at it. It doesn't get too hard for them. And it's all a smile, because it's just not, it's like, I don't know. It's like only certain people are going to be. And I couldn't understand it all my life, because I thought everybody was like me. And I was like, well, how come you don't measure up? They're not like you. Just like that guy and you there. You two were probably 2 out of 100 people that would be met in the deer woods. You know what I mean?
Right.
The whole package comes in minute amounts. And if everybody was like that, there wouldn't be anything left out there to hunt. Everybody would wipe it all out all the time, because everybody would be the world-class hardcore hunter of all time, right?
Right.
And that's not good. We just, it's like nobody could be Michael Jordan, but Michael Jordan, and
that's a great way. That's a great way to put it. Not that I'm Michael Jordan. I try, right? It's like I got the effort.
Exactly. I can put together a number of qualities of a world-class bow hunter. I can name 10 of them, and you could probably go through 100 guys, and they might have 4 or 5 or 6 of those. But to get all 10 of those things, and discipline is one of the biggest ones, and that means not only it means financial, that means physical, that means mental, and then you've got to also have some savvy. You've got to build it up over time. You can't read about it, you can't watch it on TV and go out there and expect to do it successfully at a hardcore do-it-yourself level. Nothing but the school of hard knocks will get you through that.
Yeah, and I think there's also a point in especially that type of hunting where you almost have to go out and do it on your own at least once and prove it to yourself once. Right. At least it was that for me. And I went to, I drew an Iowa tag one year, and I went out and was hunting, all public. Went to a place I'd never been before, and had 2 weeks, and and it wasn't like oh, woe is me, I was hunting Iowa. It's a target rich environment, sure. But I had there was a mental challenge that I had, because I literally missed the same big deer twice on day 6, and then again on like day 10. I caught back up to him. I missed him, and I had 4 total encounters with him, and I just couldn't get him stuck. And most people probably would have just packed it in at that point,
Right.
And then I just kept grinding through, and I ended up killing a good buck at 3:30 p.m. on the last day of the hunt, on the 16th day.
Yeah. Boy, when you tell stories like that, it brings back so many memories of, I'm going to say that 10% of my 100% of outdoor bow hunting experiences, 10% of them are those kills the last day, the last evening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And them's the ones you remember for the rest of your life. The satisfaction from that stuff. I mean, if you got the passion, the self-induced satisfaction from that is what you live for. It's your drug. It's your high to have done the whole 9 yards and pull it out in the bottom of the ninth, you know?
Yeah, because that was the first time I went out of state DIY on my own.
Wow.
You know, like to where it's like I didn't, you know, I'd gone on other out of state trips, out of state hunts and stuff like that. But it was always with like a friend, a buddy, or whatever. You know, we would always go together. We'd hunt different places, but we, you know, always had like a camp buddy. That was the first one where I was staying by myself, you know, freestyle hunting a piece I'd never been on before, reading signs, chasing deer from dark to dark every day, you know, and then finally on the 16th day, you know, had 2 misses. And then finally on the 16th day, I screwed up an opportunity on one that was probably 180 inches in a draw in a CRP field, you know, so there was plenty of like screwing stuff up to where, you know, it was just one of those things where, you know, I guess a little bit that I proved to myself that I had the mental makeup to just kind of grind through it and get it, you know? And it was from that point on where I was like, all right, I can go do whatever hunt now. Like it might be more physically taxing. It might, you know, whatever the case is, but nothing's going to be as challenging as grinding 16 days, missing deer, and at moments doubting whether or not you even want to be there, you know? And so it was the fact that I could get through that. I was like, you know what, I can go do whatever hunt now. I'm not worried about it. Let's just go wherever you want to go. Just drop a pin on a map and I'll go. You know, that was kind of my thinking.
It's hard to make whitetail hunting hard, but you can do it. Those type of trips like that, that's hard. But when you go to the alpine wilderness country of the West, the ruggedest 12,000 foot wilderness, and spend 5 weeks in it and gut through that and learn to love it, you come home and I didn't understand this till I did it, but it made me to where the absolute nightmarish of whitetail hunts I've ever been on in my life are candy or panty waste stuff anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, because I don't know that I don't know that I would have been able to grind through that hunt if I hadn't done a Western 2-week
Western
mountain,
hardcore,
you know, in the mountains of Montana for, you know, where it's like one day it was 90, the next day it was 32 with a foot of snow, like, you know, hiking 15 miles, you know, it was that experience that was probably the catalyst for me to say, hey, you can take on challenging hunts. Like, just go do it. Like it's probably not going to be any worse than this, you know?
No. I mean, I admire all Western bow hunters and I admire Eastern whitetail guys. They've all got their own hardcore qualities, and some of them are, you know, unique to just that perspective. I've tried to live both of them and get in the middle somewhere there, because I mean, I love whitetail hunting. It's my off season time after I've spent 2 months out west busting my guts out. I mean, it's nothing for me to get up at 3:30. I've had days where I've got up at 3 o'clock, drove an hour, 2.5 hours in the dark, park, unload the backpack with my tree stand, all my accessories in it, lunch, everything I carry, 35-pound pack with my bow, hike an hour in the dark, an hour, we're talking 2 miles, cross the prairie, unbroken wilderness prairie, no roads, nothing, have to use a GPS to find my tree stand in the dark across the prairie. You can't walk 2 miles across the prairie in the dark and not get lost. You will not come. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The prairie is undulating and rolling, and you're not going to end up 2 miles over there where you want to be. Get in that tree before shooting light, set till after shooting light, get down and drive home 2.5 hours, and think it was a fun day.
I know. That's the thing. Yeah, because I mean, I to me that sounds like great fun, you know. But there are definitely people out there to look at you and be like, "Man, you are crazy," you know. You're
out of your mind. Yeah, you know, they want the leisurely weekend warrior hunts, and I'm all for it. I'm getting to the point. I'm finally, for the first time in my life, starting to understand those people, because, you know, I mean, you got to face it. When you get old, things are going to change. I didn't think I would change as much as I have, but I'm firmly entrenched in the low testosterone age and all that
Right.
junk that goes on when you get older,
Yeah.
And I'm starting to ease up and
Yeah.
take it a little easier.
Well, that's why I always tell people, they'll ask, they'll say, why don't you got this tag, just say Kansas or Iowa or wherever, because I'm headed to Kansas this year. They would ask, why don't you go somewhere where you have a better chance of maybe, seeing more deer, right? Like, go to an outfitter or whatever the case is, right? And my response is always to them, look, if that's what someone wants to do, and that's what they like to do, like, I hope that they go do that. I'm all for people doing what they want to do. I was like, but for me, I was like, that type of hunt for me, there's a time and a place for it whenever my body won't allow me to do the things that I want to do anymore. I was like, but
that's a good,
while my body is willing and my mind is willing and my body is able, I want to do the hardest hunts that I can to get those experiences while I can, because you can only do those, but for a certain time of your life. And
exactly.
And I don't want to give those up too early is the point.
Well, most people, most of the standard, we're taught to, work the factory till you're 62 and retire and then go and do all that stuff. Mm-hmm. That's one of the greatest myths perpetuated on the American society is retirement. Well, by the time you get 62, if you ain't done it, you're not going to do it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
that's a great
point.
I
tell everybody, get started when you're young, make it happen. Just climb it a step at a time. If you start when you're 18 on just your first little out-of-state whitetail hunt, by the time you're 28, 10 years later, you're going to be hitting the mountains out west. It's a natural progression, and if you don't go down that road, then you didn't have it to begin with, and you'll find something else you like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that's interesting, I want to shift gears here real quick because we've been talking about your passion for that grind hunt and stuff like that, and a lot of people know you and know your success and know that you've killed big deer and elk and western game and all this stuff throughout your career, but what they probably don't realize is what it took to become as consistent as you are, and that you've been, right, and they only see you for those successes. Can you talk a little bit about how much failure lies behind that consistent success that people know you for?
Well, this almost gets to a point that I don't go there, which is, I'm afraid for me to describe it truthfully, it may sound not realistic and it may sound arrogant. And I'm not, I don't have an arrogant bone in my body, but after the first year or two out west, and then after I first finally hit a certain point around age 29 or 30, somewhere right in there on whitetail. I mean, it took me a long time on whitetail to get out of the dumb stage, if you want to call it that. I mean, I just was not getting it on whitetail. I finally matured on it. And out west, after that first year, I'm going to say that for the past 30 years out west, like especially on elk trips, I don't know that I've made 3 or 4 that I didn't kill elk. My success has averaged 95 or 98% for 30 years. You know what I mean? And I mean, from Montana to Arizona, once I figured elk out, I know how they live. Once I know how they live, I don't have a problem with elk. If I go to the elk woods, something's going belly up. I'm going to kill their hides. I mean, I am so dominant on elk that it ain't even a question, because I know exactly what's on their mind. I know every moment of the day what they're thinking and what they're fixing to do. And being a woodsman, you got them then. You just got to play the terrain and everything else, to your benefit, and you ought to be in their face all the time, and you got to, there's no way I could write a book on all what I know about elk and how to hunt them and stuff, but really it wouldn't do a guy good. He's got to get out there and learn it like we will, like I did and like you are. Do it yourself, and then you're going to hit a point, and it's all going to, your success is just not I never had a problem even worrying about killing elk every year I went. It was always how large a one I wanted to get. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Because you got to have a challenge And when you finally reach a bar, you always move the bar up. You don't, and that's one problem with me now. I've reached a high of bars I'm ever going to reach with elk. I've killed like, I don't know, mid-30s mature bulls, something like that, and I haven't reached 400 inches, but I mean, real close 390s and junk and stuff. I don't have any more goals on elk, you know. And whitetail wise, I've been realistic. I've not, you know, been able to run with the really top end big dogs like the guys like the Drury type people and the you know, Higgins and some of these guys. That there's a level of whitetail out there that the average Joe like you or I are never going to see, because it's more of a business and a money game when you get to that point.
Right.
You've got to custom hand build the top end whitetail level. You can't get that level of whitetail being a do-it-yourself blue collar guy. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. You know, there's a.
I mean, I don't want to degrade it.
No,
but there is a level out there that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like that caliber of deer in public places are just they're phantoms. Like they're few and far between.
Yeah,
Not saying that they don't exist, but man, trying to find one in those places is like a needle in a haystack. You know, they're a needle in a haystack anyway, just in general, and then magnify that by the time, you know, the magnitude of however much pressure they're getting on public land, and you know, just how many are getting killed, deer are getting killed in general on public land, right? You're not manicuring or manufacturing, you know, the herd, so to speak. You know, what was your, you mentioned, you know, elk was something that you just like, it just clicked and made sense. What about what was the thing for whitetails? Like, I guess, you know, give me a sense of, do you remember a specific kind of watershed moment for whitetail hunting where, you know, where things just all of a sudden clicked and made sense, and it was like, okay, I got it, I understand it now?
It was a watershed season. It was a 3-month grind. It was 1988, and I had been at it, progressing a little bit more each year. I was still in the infancy stages. I'd killed deer, nothing real big, but I finally got access to a quality piece of property here in my home state that was big enough for me to go in there and just hunt them all day long, every single day, and not have to worry about them being run amok. I became a deer observer, and I went in there and I hunted between October 1 and December 31, which was our bow season. I hunted every day out of those 3 months except 3. 3 days out of those 3 months, I was not there. And out of the days I was there, 60 some of them, I was there from daylight to dark. Okay. I got through that year with deer on the brain. I watched deer do everything deer do. I learned more about whitetail deer in that season, in those thousands of hours I set out there. I just had a massive cram course on their behavior and how they function. And I just come to some realizations that season of what had to be done, you know, through the different stages of October, November, and December, how they lived their life, how they utilize their habitat, how their behavioral characteristics, everything from does to button bucks to 2.5-year-old bucks to the big mature bucks. I mean, I watched them, I learned them. And after that season, then I fell into it like, you know, a duck in water. I just, then all I had to do was start branching out and going to where I could hunt big deer then.
Right.
And, you know, I started going out of state. Back in that day, I had about a 3 or 4 year run in eastern Colorado that was incredible. I went out there. That was one of the first places I traveled to back in the late 80s, was in eastern Colorado. I was driving through it every year to go up there and go hunting, and I had become aware there were whitetails in eastern Colorado. I went out there, and for 3 or 4 years, I had seasons that would rival anything anybody could do with money. I mean, I was seeing 1 to 4 Boone and Crockett plus bucks every year.
Wow.
I mean, it was good.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. I don't care where you're at. That's good. I mean, is there, what was the hardest thing for you to, like, is there one thing that you could point to that was the hardest thing for you to learn about whitetails that let you start to get consistent on them? Because for me, I'll give you a for example. For me, things started making a lot more sense to me once I was able to stop thinking about what my wind and thermals were going to do, that I could just get to a spot and I could understand what my prevailing was and what the thermals were going to do as the day changed, whether it was morning into, afternoon or afternoon into evening. Once I understood how to give the deer the wind and I understood what my thermals were going to do and how to play those, everything started making a lot more sense for me. It became not easy, I don't want to say, but I knew how to hunt areas when I got to them. I didn't have to think about it anymore. Is there anything like that for you that was more challenging to pick up and learn, that once you kind of got it, it was kind of the nail in the coffin, so to speak?
Well, I'm sure, and I think back about picking up, I learned so much about the thermal and all.
I was just going to say, elk hunting,
Yeah, out west, you absolutely live and die by thermals out west in the mountains. So I already had that down before I got good at whitetail. The thing that really, and I'm weird here because I'm not saying that what I did for all these years on whitetails was the best approach to kill the biggest bucks, but it was what I fell into. It's what I did, and it's feathered my nest well. I haven't killed 200-inch deer. I've killed absolute dump truck load of book bucks and lots of my best bucks are up in the upper 180s. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But what I learned was this: how to hunt them during the peak of the rut. I knew that I was probably never in my lifetime going to have a place that was unbothered. I was going to either be hunting public land or somewhere that is a freak show. So I was not going to be able to set up these hunts like we see on the TV shows where, you've got this big acreage and you get everything and you can go in there and their pattern. And all. I knew that was never going to be me. So I decided I was going to have to learn to hunt them during the only time the big ones are at their weakest moment, during that helter-skelter time when they're breeding and they're out of their mind and they're staggering around doing dumb stuff. So what I learned from watching them way back there, and it took me quite a few years, even after I learned this, to start putting it in practice, because you just can't stick your neck out far enough to go for this, is how those big ones, the ones that you don't rarely ever see, you don't even know they're around, the vapors, those giants, how that every time after year they showed up, it was always in the most off-the-wall place and off-the-wall time. It's never in the standard place and the standard time. And so when I finally got a grip on that and started going out of the normal on my places and times, I started killing my biggest bucks. Now, it's more like the place you said before, because you're stepping out into a place there where you're not going to see very many deer very often. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
You've got to get away from that willingness to, most everybody wants to hunt where all the hot sign is and where the freak show's going on. Well, that's fine. You're going to have a lot of fun down there and you're probably going to kill 140s. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I killed the bigger ones out in the far reaches of their fringe habitat, out there where nobody hunts, where they actually spend most of their time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I mean, I'm just curious, can you give me, because I'm trying to envision this, is there an example, or is there a strategy that you've used? Maybe it's not even that it's been consistent, but it's like maybe there's a strategy that you're remembering that worked. Can you just give me an example of one of these kind of setups, what the scenario was, time of year, things like that, just so I can kind of wrap my head around what you're, because I totally agree with you. And I've heard this. I think folks have kind of, have kind of know this in the back of their mind. Right. But it's a really, really hard habit to break, to get off all that sign and, and move to an area where you take a look around and you look at it and you say, it doesn't look like a deer would ever live here. But
that's where
So give me an example, I guess, of like a hunt where it all played out like that, or like a tactic that you used to get it done.
Well, I'll give you a good one. And this is probably one of the oldest whitetail bucks I've ever killed. He was way past his prime. He was an ancient old monarch, prairie deer out of Kansas. I was hunting in a section, a literal, square mile section of prairie that didn't have 15 acres of cover in the whole square mile, and it was patchy, it was stringer, it was brush. And I had, on the next section over, is a big creek bottom. that's where all the signs at. That's where all the deer were at. You could go down there and just froth at the bit. That's where 99 out of 100 guys wanted to go hunt. Well, I had kind of started seeing and learning, caught some crossing the road at night and different things coming out of that prairie. And I was like, I got to get this going. So I go out there. I took a day and beat that down, and I learned that there were swags, I call them, gentle gullies out in there that you didn't even know were out there, that had little brush patches and different things. And I found one that had about 3 cottonwood trees in it, about 100 yards apart up and down it, wide open country. You could see the horizon for 360 degrees around you, just blue stem prairie. And in there, in that one swag, was a big old honking signpost rub. And I said, okay, that's what I thought. And that's all I need to know. So I put me a stand in this cottonwood. And I'm telling you, if I didn't ever feel like one of the dumbest, I mean, if you saw where this was at, you would have a problem believing it. It's unbelievable. You wouldn't think whitetail deer were even out there. And there weren't hardly any out there, and there weren't really very many does at all around anywhere, bucks either. It was just this one great big one. I knew he was there because there's rubs right here in front of me. I sat there for 3 days, from dark in the morning till dark in the evening, and I caught glimpses of 3 or 4 different deer at a distance during that time. And I was just about at my wit's end. Every day I was getting more convinced I was a Looney Tune. And it was November the 18th. I'll not forget it. The 4th day I sat there was my birthday, November the 18th. So it's right in the middle of breeding season. And since then, I've kind of learned, you may have heard of breeding hideouts, breeding sanctuaries. Yep. Well, I was evidently in that big buck's little hidey hole out there in the prairie. And sure enough, right at dusk on that 4th day, and I really believe it's going to be my last day sitting out there. I don't think I could have took it any longer. Right in the evening, I seen a doe coming across the prairie, and then right behind her was that giant. They come over that prairie for a mile and come over in there and dropped into that little swag I was in, and he ended up right at the end of shooting light where I could shoot him and kill him. And he was as old as any whitetail buck can get and live in the wild. He had virtually no teeth left in his head. He was just an ancient, monstrous old monarch. Now, his antlers probably had been bigger at some point in his life, but he still grossed around 170 as an old downhill buck. Right. And, no. I just went out there and put in the dues that, I don't think very many guys would enjoy that hunt at all. And I don't advise them to do it because it's not fun. It's mentally draining. But boy, if you're after just a big one, what I've learned in the open country is get out there in the fringe stuff. When I used to hunt the Flint Hills area, which I just finally actually this year got me a piece of land, first piece I've ever owned in my life. And I bought it up there in the prairie of Kansas. And, I can go down to my big creek bottom and it's just lined with scrapes and rubs and all the deer and the sign, and you just have a ball down there hunting. And pretty soon you've run them all off. You're hunting right in their living room. And I don't even go down there much anymore. I just set out on I call it the spokes of the Ferris wheel. I set out on the far spokes and I let them come to me. I leave them alone in their core areas and don't educate them and don't relocate them. And I let my local deer be local deer. I don't move them. And then sure enough, during that peak time in November, if I sat there and put my dues in, some big old gomer is going to come staggering across the prairie and walk down my fence line. Because I sit out in hedgerows and fence lines that people don't even look at when they drive by.
So when you saw those deer off in the distance kind of moving, right? Did you?
Yep. Yes.
Did you think about getting down and trying to make a move closer? And I guess the question I'm asking is, do you hunt aggressively, or do you think that you're more of a patient hunter and let the hunt come to you?
Whitetail-wise, this is weird because I'm one of the most aggressive Western hunters I think's ever hit the ground out there. I've often made the statement I try to run them down with a pair of tennis shoes and a pocket knife and kill elk. I'm crazy aggressive. I'm out of my mind aggressive out west, but whitetail wise, I grew up a tree stand hunter, and I'm probably absolutely stupidly unaggressive. I have killed them off the ground. And it's funny you mentioned that, because that buck story I just told you about, they finally ended up right there in front of me at dark, and I shot the buck. It's weird because you hit a point that I didn't think I had time to mention, but I will. When I first seen him with her out there, he had her at about 150, 200 yards, and I felt I could crawl up on him and get a shot at him. I actually let my bow down out of the tree on my rope, climbed down, got my bow, and started to sneak over there and put a maneuver on him, chickened out of it, and went back and climbed back up the tree and set another hour till dark, and finally got him over there by me. I actually called his doe over to me with Blates, you know?
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I don't, here's the way if I think I can get down and kill them, I'll get down and crawl down a ditch. I've crawled down ditches up in Illinois, irrigation ditches, with one side of me in the water, belly crawling to get up on something. I'll hunt aggressively for whitetails if I think it's the thing to do, but I've just always kind of been patient and let them come to me, basically.
Right. Now, what would you say your percentage hunts are from a stand versus from the ground? Because it's for me, headed out there this year, I'm anticipating I'm going to be doing a lot of ground hunting. But I also listened to you, and I've listened to you talk about it at different times, and I know that you like to hunt out of elevated sets a lot. And so, I'm just curious of what your breakdown kind of is.
If I was you, and it was my first year, and I'm going to Kansas, I'm going to the open country, and I'm wanting to try to learn a walk-in or a public place or something. The problem that I've run into is if you go there during prime time, there's going to be so many people hunting publics and walk-ins that you don't feel like you can get out and walk around in them. You're going to be walking by people and goofing up their hunts. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But so anyway, what I would do is I'd carry my little, I make a little homemade little 3-pound portable stand I can strap on my back, and a couple of, lightweight, easy climb steps and things. Carry them on your back with you, carry your stuff. But I would still hunt but hunt aggressively off the ground in a scout sort of mission. And what you're going to do is you're going to do that for a while, and then you're going to see and learn some things, and all of a sudden the light bulb will come on, and you'll know what to do next. You need to go through your habitat, see how the deer are there, learn what's going on. And then, if maybe you see I have found some pinch points that the minute I seen these things, I was like, oh God. And I was like, holy crap, this is a no-brainer of the universe, right? And all you need to do, I actually did it in eastern Colorado. I scout hunted all day down the side of the Arkansas River, waded the river, and scout hunted back up the other side the second half of the day. And at it's 3:00 in the evening, I walked into one of them pinch points that the minute I walked into it, looked around me, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I didn't have no tree stand. I was like, I'll be back tomorrow. But it was like 2.5 hours of daylight. I looked over there and found a cottonwood tree, hugged it, climbed it, stood on a limb. Literally, no tree stand, nothing. Stood on a limb, leaned back against the tree, said, I can do this for 2.5 hours till dark. 30 minutes later, killed a 170 typical.
Oh man, I love that. That's probably one of my favorite hunting stories now. Like just climbing a tree, dealing with what you got,
Well, when you see these spots, if you got outdoorsmanship, you can walk into certain things. If you scouted the square mile in Ohio for whitetails, or you scouted eastern Colorado river bottom for a day, you're going to figure out what you need to be doing, and you'll do it. And, just be prepared for anything, whether it be building a ground blind, whether it be throwing up a quick tree stand in 5 minutes, maybe, real quiet. Like that day right there, if I'd have just hiked out and got my tree stand out of the truck and come back, I could have been back in an hour, and I wouldn't have killed that deer. Right. I knew, I'd have to describe this pinch point to you. It had a trail beat down in it with 4-finger tracks going both directions. It had a set of rubs coming through it from both directions, the size of your knee. I was like, I never seen anything like this in my life. This is an absolute no-brainer. So I climbed a tree, and the first deer that come through it was a giant typical buck. And so, You just got to make calls, most of which aren't, if you're a bow hunter, you know that 50% of the calls you make, or maybe 90% of them aren't right. But that one or two or three out of 10 that you do make right are the ones that are extremely satisfying,
Right. Now, how much calling, not, calls as far as decisions, but I know you called that doe into you that brought that buck in whenever you were out in that swag, right?
Right.
How often are you using calls? Like, is it something that you have found, hunting that open country that works pretty well? Rattling works. Does it work well? Does grunting, like, what is your kind of take on calling in general, and how often do you use it?
I've hunted all over Kansas extensively, and in that prairie country, those bucks travel long distances and they're fairly uneducated. They have enormous acreages. They've got 10 and 20 and 30 and 40,000 acre areas to live in up there, those giant ranches. Mm-hmm. And all they are is cattle ranches. They're not hunted much. Those deer are not super educated deer like you guys got back east.
Right.
You can call them till the cows come home up there. I live and die by calling up there in that prairie. I can sit out in a lone cottonwood in a square mile out in the middle of it, and if I see a buck over there that I think can even hear my rattling antlers, he might be a half a mile. If I think he can hear me, I believe I can call him up there and shoot him with my bow.
So pretty confident in calling out there.
Absolutely. Now, I don't think I need to say this, but I mean, that's during that peak rut time, right?
Right. Yeah. No, totally.
Right.
Got
I'm not
that.
talking about October, December necessarily. I mean, when they're on the prowl,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would be the peak time? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when you catch a mature deer by himself crossing the prairie or anywhere, if you can't call that deer in, you need to take up golf, because that guy is looking for action. You know what I'm saying?
No,
I mean, I'm not
know what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, a mature buck should be with a hot doe almost all the way from about November the 15th through the latter part of the month. He should be breeding. If you catch him between hot does, you know what I'm saying? He'll come to a call. But that time is usually, to me, I usually start calling him in pretty effectively with grunt calls and different type things like that, tickling antlers, like sparring bucks, starting around November 1. But about the 10th of November is when it really starts changing, when they start getting psycho, and there's probably some of the does coming in,
Mm-hmm. Is there a time frame, or if you had to pick a day or a 3-day window to hunt Kansas, what would your suggestion be? Or what is your preferred, preferred dates, I guess?
First thing, I'd have to ask this question: what is your goals in the way of a buck?
I want to kill a good deer. I don't need to kill a giant. But I'd like to kill something in the 140s and up.
Okay. The best time to do that would probably be the 1st through the 10th.
Okay.
They're still at their home. They're up a lot. They're aggressive, but they haven't took off yet. They haven't left their home. You know what I mean?
Yep. Now,
get out there. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, now what if someone wanted to kill a giant? What would your time frame be?
Absolutely, positively Thanksgiving. You got to wait till they're out of their mind if you don't have a setup. Like if you're a Joe Blow and you own a square mile and your deer are there, and it's different ball game. But if you're hunting like you and I do, you've got to wait till those big ones have been breeding. They will finally break their standards down, and they'll start doing dumb stuff. They come out of the woodwork around Thanksgiving. They come out of the woodwork.
Okay. That's interesting. It's pretty consistent with some stuff. Like, I think, my buddy was talking to, I know, I believe Jared Scheffler. He was talking to him just about hunting Kansas and stuff. Right. And he was saying, he was pretty consistent with what you said. I think he said like somewhere between like the 8th and the 10th has always been kind of, he basically said, don't miss the 8th through the 10th. He's like, do whatever you can do to be there those 3 days. Those 8th,
would be my, if I had to pick 3, I wouldn't go back toward the 1st through the 10th. I'd go toward the 10th, 9th, 8th. Yeah.
Yeah. The and I'm curious, I know you scout a lot, but I'm just curious what your scout to hunt ratio is, even when you're traveling out of state. Like, is it 50-50, or do you scout 2 days for every 1 day you're going to hunt? Like, what does that kind of look like?
Boy, that's a good one, because I've tried it every different direction. And of course, a lot of it depends on, there's so many variables, but I think overall, I've always been a guy that wanted to put his feet on the ground. I just believe that if I can scout the area that I'm going to hunt, I believe I can figure out what to do and get the job done. Now, I've killed them without the scouting. I usually hunt my way in, I call it. I start out at the edges in the first decent looking spot I find, and usually a day or two, I'm ready to move in. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, now this, it depends on the habitat. If you're in giant northern woods, you can throw all this out the window. But farm country and broken country with open and wood lots and things, hunt your way in if you're not going to go put your feet. I'm going to go to a place. I don't care when it is. I'm going in there the first day, and I'm packing a lunch, and I am going to walk 10 or 12 miles inside a square mile. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it makes sense.
I'm going to learn every square inch of that mile I'm hunting. I want to have a picture in my brain of I'm going to learn where the 2 or 3 hot spots are. In other words, you're going to find 2 or 3 spots here or there that are going to be covered up with rubs and scrapes and trails and droppings and deer and blah, blah, blah. Then I'm going to step back and put it in perspective to how those big bucks, when they go, they're going to go to those spots at night. I'm going to figure out how they're going to travel, what route they're going to travel between those 3 spots. Connect the dots. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's a fact. They're going to go down there at night and pick them up a hot doe, and then they're going to take her back out away from the action. Them big bucks don't tolerate, a breeding doe down there around all that, because every big buck that comes by, there's going to be a big fight. It's ugly. It don't work. Them big bucks will run them out in the pasture and get them away from everybody. But I want to hunt them on the in-between spots, between the hot spots, because if I'm going to hunt a hot spot, I better have about 3 or 4 of them, because I'm going to goof them up pretty quickly. You go sit right in a core area all day, you goof it all up, right?
Yeah, and it kind of ties back to what you were saying before, how you kind of hunt the spokes, right? But
yes,
rather than hunting the hub. If you look at it like a Ferris wheel or whatever, that totally makes sense, because exactly what you're saying, they're going to lay down a lot of that sign at night, and they're going to kind of swim through there and try to pick themselves out a hot doe. And so if you can kind of get away from that and understand, you might not get the big buck that's cutting out the hot doe like you did, where you had him pegged where he was going to take her to breed, right? But if you can get yourself in between a couple of those hot spots where they're going to be checking, and just kind of play that game. So with that, are you focusing more on the does, or are you focusing on where the bucks are going to be? Because a lot of folks during that time frame will just, they'll say, I'm hunting the does. Like, wherever the does are at is where I want to be. But it sounds like you don't necessarily follow that logic.
I stay totally away from the doe core areas. You can't do nothing but goof your deer up. If you set in doe core areas, how can you do that without goofing them up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I have no answer.
I don't either.
You're going to run your does amok. You're going to scent the whole place down, coming and going, and say, unless you've got some way to snap your fingers and be there and be gone and not have no scent, you can't set in the core areas unless. You better have 6 or 8 core areas so you can hunt them on a rotational basis. You can booger a core area once, but you better not go back and do it 2 or 3 days in a row. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to move them. So I hunt out on what I call travel corridors.
Mm-hmm.
Travel corridors, where those bucks are getting from point A over here in this creek drainage. They're coming over and they're checking this other creek drainage over here. And sometimes they may be checking the same creek drainage a mile apart, but they're not going to walk right down the side of that creek a mile to get down there. They'll go out in the prairie, hit a hedgerow that's in a swag, and walk down it, and then jump back over the creek. Them big old timers know where the danger's at. It's down there in that cover. That's where everybody's in danger. I mean, everybody gets hunted down there, and that's where all the people are goofing around, and they're in the cover. Right. So they live out away from from it. And now, if you're wanting to kill these 140s, get down there, man. Jump in the cover, rape and pillage, and a 140 will be by, and you'll fill your tag, and it's on to the next hurrah.
Right.
But if you want to lay down a big one, the best ones around, the oldest bucks, you got to not hunt. Does this make sense? You got to not hunt normal.
Yeah. No, it's consistent with, it's funny because, a couple fellows, including you, that I've talked to, that have killed good deer in their lives and continue to kill good deer.
Right.
The theme has kind of been, hunting off the sign, like the significant sign that they're finding, right? Whether it's you're doing it in prairie, right? You've done it in a lot of different places, but we're talking, open country right now. I've got another buddy who he hunts in the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia and kills giants there doing the same thing. Just completely different setup, but same philosophy, right? And so I think a lot of folks just get enamored with that big sign, and I'll count myself as part of that. I have a hard time breaking away from it still, So
who don't, man? There's nothing sends a bow hunter's blood boiling any more than a gigantic scrape or a gigantic rub.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, do you find, is there a consistent kind of habitat in that open country that you find consistent action, if you will, right, to hunt? So whether it's like a ditch or a hedgerow or like I'll give you an example. Some people, here in the East, maybe they got a field somewhere, they're going to put a mock scrape in, just as an example. And they'll put that mock scrape out in the middle of a field, single tree that they've planted, or a single, pole in the ground with a branch hanging off of it, because deer just seem to be attracted to that one single thing that seems to be out in the middle of nowhere. They want to check it out. They're curious. Do you find anything in that open country that always kind of pulls deer, like it has a gravity that just pulls deer to it?
Well, now that I'm not sure I feel that I've ever found any secret ingredient that, now I do know for the biggest, oldest bucks, what they like is take your drainage, go to the secondary drainage coming in from the side, and then go up it about a mile, and then go to your third drainage, which is the feeder drainage coming into it, and follow it up to the last thickets up in there. Does that make sense? Because when you get that far up there, you're right where they're laying during the day. That's where they bed. That's where they're going to be in the month of October. They'll be laying up there in the heads of them third tier drainages, goofing around, getting up at dusk, and slowly starting to, they're wanting to go down there bad, but they're not doing it yet. They might make it halfway down there, but they never start getting down. So that is one thing, is get Google, look at the drainages, and as they start to go up and fork and branch off, if you're wanting to go do something weird, now I've done this some in October, and I am not like a really good bow shot. I'm not one of these guys that shoots way out there and does good. But I have crawled upon some of these big guys out there in October. I'll go to the heads of a big drainage where I can see 2 or 3 of these second and third drainages ending out in the prairie, and I'll sit there and glass them in the evening. I've watched them get up out of thickets that were 3 or 4 foot wide, stand up. They just appear. They've been laying there all day, and they'll stand up. And I've made moves on them, and I've come real close to getting one of the big suckers killed off the ground in October. But I usually just end up getting within 60, 70 yards of them and not getting a shot. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. Would those places also act as, or could they act as that kind of breeding sanctuary you were talking about before, since they're so kind of remote and maybe away from where all that big sign would be laid down?
Oh, I know they are, because I've watched them back out there with a doe later. I've actually went and built a ground blind in some of them little thickets out there and sat and tried to wait. And I've watched them come out there. It's getting them in the general area is not always a problem, but it's getting them close enough to get them bow shot in, because this is so open that you really don't have a lot of room most of the time to do much maneuvering. And even if you get them in the next gully over from you, you crawl up there and peer over, and they're standing down there 70 yards or something. And it's a very fickle thing. I would rather do this, though, at my stage of hunting than being down there in the big creek bottom where all the real deer action's going on, where the 140s are running around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of years having a lot of fun with a lot of deer, And I've just got to where now that ain't my priority. I would rather go out there where I got peace and quiet, and there's not much going on out there. There's not going to be people bothering me. And I'm going to see a big one ever so often, and I'm happy with that. But what I do is not for the early stage bow hunter. It'll drive you insane. You need to dive in down there and kill the good bucks and be happy. And then one day you'll get to where you'll start getting away from that, you know?
Right. The, what I find really interesting is that, you know, I know that you like to hunt that pre-rut time frame and stuff like that.
Right.
And I was, talking to, I know a fellow that, you know as well, Tony Peterson. And we were just kind of talking about these, traveling and stuff like that. And it cracks me up because I asked him, I was like, when would you go? When would you go to Kansas? And I knew what he was going to say, because it was the exact opposite of me, and it's the exact opposite of you, I think. And he said, I would go in October when I don't have anybody out there. He's like, I'm going to glass, figure out what the pattern is, and I'm going to move in on them. And I just have a hard time. I need him to be dumb. I'm not at a point yet where I can. I need him to be stupid for me to have a chance.
I got to tell you right up front what Tony does. I've got just a deep level of respect for it. I have delved into it a little bit over the years, but I don't stay hooked because I put so much time and so much effort into the month of November that I just don't have it in me anymore to do it that hard and that long in October too. I'll burn out. I just think I can't put 2 months of that in anymore. So I'm going to do the November thing and the rut when they're done. But I totally agree with his. I mean, there is a very viable argument with his line of thinking of getting there. There's positives about being there in October, especially from October the 15th through about October the 30th, when those guys are getting up earlier and giving you something to go on. You can spot them and see a little bit about what they're doing then,
Mm-hmm.
It's if the guy's got unlimited time, he could, if he went out there and did that the last 2 weeks of October, he would be so prepared that by the time the November rut come along, it would be just a matter of what were you going to kill? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that was kind of what I had said to him was, I feel like Kansas would be one of the places that I would maybe feel comfortable doing that, only because there would be less people. I could do a lot of glassing and maybe find one bedded, and he's going to probably do the same thing day over day at that point in mid-October, because he was saying like second week ish of October, middle of October. And I was like, if you could find one, and you could bet him, you could have a chance, because what he's going to do. You know where he's probably going to feed based on where he's bedded, and you can just kind of watch him and know, and you could make a move and try to intercept him. Like, it totally makes sense. I was like, I just don't know that I have the confidence yet to try to pull something like that off.
Well, you want to hunt them all the ways you can hunt them, but doing it is a different thing. How much time can a guy supply? I mean, he's got a life, you can't just go crazy and spend 2 months in Kansas, in a sense, trying to kill one deer, maybe.
Right.
You've got to pick your 2-week window and go get the job done and move on in life. I mean, I'm pretty blessed. I live here close to Kansas. I have unlimited time, and yet I haven't really put the dues in to do what he's doing. I did it enough to see that it's there, that resource is real, and I admire him for getting out there and bringing it to fruition with some dead deer,
Yeah, because, I mean, he does it whether it's Nebraska or whatever. That's usually when he likes to go, is that early season, It's like, I need some pointers from him, maybe is what I need. I'm getting some pointers from you now. Maybe I need some pointers from him, too. We'll maybe between the two, you'll help me I'll get a tag filled, maybe. But
you'll get some pointers, all right. They'll get you on some wild goose chases when you listen to me. I'll tell you.
Well, hey, I would chase geese with you any day of the week, Eddie. That's for sure, man. So, but hey, I want to be respectful of your time. I have one last question for you here before I let you go. This is the hardest one I'm going to ask you all night. All right. So,
all right.
And it's not even really about deer hunting. If you had to pick, if you had to make a basketball team of just 3 players, right, for a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, made up of the best archery deer hunters that you know, who would those 3 be?
Well,
and they don't have to be, they don't have to be alive. They can, they don't need to be with us any longer, and you don't even need to personally know them.
Well, I don't know any of these top end bow hunters in the industry. I'm a square peg. The industry and I don't deal with them. They don't really like me. I've been branded a bit of a stuck up, but it's just because I'm a loner. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, makes sense.
I'm sure there's guys in the industry that are some of the best deer hunters on the earth, but I don't know them. I'd have to pick guys that I know people would have never heard of them. Is that
that's perfect.
Doing good? You know?
Yeah.
Well, it's just a few of the guys that I have grown up around that have went with me for 10 or 20 years, and I've watched them because this sounds ugly, but I don't keep track of other people. I don't care. I'm selfish, I guess. I just grew up that way and don't even know it. I just do what I do, and I don't really care what anybody else is doing. Does that make sense? I want everybody else to go have fun and mind their own business and leave me alone.
We are birds of a feather.
It takes all kinds, and I'm just the kind of I've entertained myself, like when I told you I played with myself. I mean,
right.
I've entertained myself my whole life. I don't know anything else. I'm not comfortable around people. I don't even people. Oh, God forgive me. I know I'm getting old. I'm probably going to need people for the rest of my life and ain't going to have anybody around. But anyway, I don't know anybody else that well to say how good of bow hunters they are. I don't hunt. The greatest bow hunter I know of right now is my friend Travis. I met him when he was about 20, and he and I started hunting together, and that boy took to it like a duck to water. And I'm telling you right up front, buddy, if you want somebody that can go to public land and figure things out and get the job done, Travis is the man. He even mystifies me on straight up public, because that's just basically all he hunts anymore. For many years has been straight up public. And I mean, when you're talking about like down here and in Kansas, in my home state, Oklahoma and Kansas, he's going out each year and averaging 2 good 150-ish type bucks every year off public land.
Wow. Well, there you go.
That's hard to say.
Maybe you're just doing a one-on-one tournament. Maybe we don't even need 3.
Well,
how's that?
I'm telling you, that boy, he was a blank slate at first. He had barely started, and I don't know, but he picked up a lot of things, and buddy, did he run with them. And that's what you got to have, because, what I do is of no use to anybody if they don't take it and run with it. Does that make sense? Yeah,
it totally makes sense. That's the thing. It's like I always tell, my bow hunting mentor is this. I've had him on the podcast before. People that listen to the show have heard me talk about him before, but so I won't make this long. But his name's Tate, and he's a friend of my father-in-law's. And I didn't start bow hunting until I was 30. I grew up hunting, but I didn't start bow hunting until I was 30 because it wasn't something that anyone around me ever did. I just didn't really know much about it.
Right.
And then he introduced me to it when I had turned 30, and it was just one of those things. Like the first time I did it, I was like, "This is all I ever want to do." And he's the same, and he's the same way, where it's like, he's like, I just sprinkled, he's like, I planted a little seed and gave it a little water. He's like, and then you just kind of freaked out, he was like, and that was it, and, so I totally get it, and to me, that's really kind of, I think the part of the beauty of bow hunting is that it is a smaller group and we have a lot in common, even if we don't talk to each other a lot. Where we have an appreciation for someone somewhere planted a seed. And if you really, really love it, it was on you to figure it out. And that part to me is really cool.
Yep. And that's what I got to do for the remaining days with me. 'Cause I've been real selfish about running and doing my own thing and staying out of everybody's sight and smell. And I got to plant some seeds in the next few years, whatever I got left. And then, if only one of them grows into a dedicated bow hunter, then that'll be a legacy I'll leave behind. I didn't have a son, so, Travis is I call him my homeboy, and I'm telling you, that guy, he's hell on wheels with this public land whitetail killing. He can go into a place, and he's been to many of them, and just within time, he's going to be sitting there with a big one walking by,
Right. That's awesome. Well,
anyway,
I'll be respectful of your time, Eddie. I appreciate you. And I look forward to following what you're doing this year. And then hopefully this wasn't too bad and you'll be willing to come back on again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Hit me up someday and we'll compare notes. And God bless and take care. I wish you the very best. And if you're in Kansas in November, give me a call and we'll touch base. We might be around the same general area and we'll meet up.
Sounds good. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those two things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.